I want to start with a quick thought experiment. Ready? I want you to think about a rock. Got it? Goods. Now, the rock is not thinking about you. And that right there is the entire mystery of consciousness in one sentence, because you just thought about a rock, and somewhere inside that thinking, there was a little voice going, I am the one thinking about this rock. Where did that voice come from? Science has spent about 300 years and approximately $9 billion trying to answer that question, and the honest answer is, we have no idea, but we have some really entertaining guesses. And tonight, I'm going to take you on a tour of the most bizarre biological accident in the known universe, your brain, being aware that it is a brain. Buckle up. Let's start at the beginning. About 540 million years ago, life on Earth was going pretty well for a single-celled organism. Your job was simple: eat, don't get eaten, divide. No meetings, no existential dread, no lying awake at 3 a.m. thinking, but what does it all mean? Then neurons happened. Neurons are cells that do something outrageous. They talk to each other. They send little electrical signals across tiny gaps called synapses, and these signals travel at roughly 270 miles per hour, which sounds impressive until you realize light travels at 670 million miles per hour. So your nervous system is essentially the postal service of biological communication. It works, it's just not fast. But here's where it gets interesting. These neurons didn't just connect 2 or 3 times. In a human brain, you have roughly 86 billion neurons. That's more neurons than there are stars in the Milky Way, and each one can connect to up to 10,000 others. That means your brain has approximately 100 trillion synaptic connections. For reference, if you tried to count to 100 trillion, one number per second, it would take you about 3.2 million years. You would not finish. You'd die, many times, across several civilizations. And somehow out of this incomprehensibly tangled electrochemical jungle comes you, sitting there, aware that you're sitting there, judging this speech. That is, by any reasonable measure, absolutely insane. Now, what is consciousness exactly? The scientific definition is, and I'm paraphrasing leading philosophers and neuroscientists here, we're working on it. But we've got some good theories. The most mainstream view right now is something called the global workspace theory, proposed by neuroscientist Bernard Bars. The idea is that your brain is basically a giant broadcasting system. Different modules, vision, hearing, memory, emotion, all work in parallel, mostly unconsciously. And consciousness is what happens when one of those signals gets broadcast to the whole brain at once, like a news alert. Your brain is essentially an iPhone, and consciousness is the notification that interrupts everything else to say, "Excuse me. You are currently experiencing this." Which is wonderful, except your brain sends about 400 billion bits of sensory information per second, and you're only consciously aware of about 2,000 of them. That means 99.9999% of what's happening inside you right now is completely invisible to the you that thinks it's in charge. You are not the CEO of your brain. You are a spokesperson who gets handed a press release after the decisions have already been made. But here's the really wild part. You don't just experience things, you experience yourself experiencing things. There's a name for this in neuroscience: metacognition, thinking about thinking, and it appears to be uniquely, gloriously, almost pathologically human. You can think the thought, I am thinking. Then you can think, I am thinking about the fact that I am thinking. Then you can think, I am now thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking, and so on, until you crash, usually around the 3rd level, and your brain quietly says, let's get a snack. This recursive self-awareness, the brain folding back on itself like some kind of philosophical origami, is what philosophers call phenomenal consciousness. David Chalmers, the philosopher, called it the hard problem of consciousness, not the tricky problem, not the somewhat difficult problem, the hard problem, capital H. Because understanding how neurons firing produces the feeling of being you, the redness of red, the pain of pain, the ineffable you-ness of the present moment, is, as far as anyone can tell, the hardest question human beings have ever asked. Harder than quantum mechanics, harder than general relativity, harder than getting a parking spot in downtown any major city on a Saturday. Now let's talk about where consciousness lives. Because for a long time, people thought they knew. Descartes, 17th century French philosopher, great hat, concluded that consciousness lived in the pineal gland, a tiny pine-cone-shaped structure in the center of your brain. His reasoning was elegant. It was the only non-paired structure in the brain, so it must be the seat of the soul. We now know the pineal gland regulates your sleep cycle. Descartes spent years defending the idea that your awareness of existence is produced by your biological alarm clock. He was not right, but I respect the confidence. Modern neuroscience points to a network of regions, the prefrontal cortex, the thalamus, the posterior cortical hot zone, that together seem to produce conscious experience, but how they do it remains stubbornly unclear. You can watch every neuron fire on an fMRI machine, label each one, map the whole symphony, and still have no idea why it feels like something to listen to music, why there is subjective experience at all. This gap between the physical and the felt is so profound that philosophers sometimes call it the explanatory gap. A gap so large that some very serious scientists have proposed that consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or electric charge, rather than something the brain produces. This idea is called panpsychism, the view that consciousness is everywhere, in everything, even in rocks and electrons. Which means maybe the rock was thinking about you, just very, very slowly. Let me tell you about your default mode network. When you're not doing anything specific, not solving a math problem, not dodging a car, just existing, your brain doesn't go quiet, it gets louder. A set of brain regions called the default mode network lights up like a Christmas tree, and what does it do? It thinks about you. It rehearses past conversations. It simulates future scenarios. It imagines what other people think of you. It replays that awkward thing you said in 2014, over and over. It constructs a narrative self, a story of who you are, where you came from, what you want, and it runs this story continuously, like background music you can't turn off. This is your sense of self, and it is not a feature, it is overhead. The DMN burns about 20% of your brain's total energy, even when you're doing nothing. Your brain is 2% of your body weight, but consumes 20% of your calories, and a significant chunk of that goes to maintaining the story of being you. You are literally spending calories on being aware that you exist. Consciousness is, metabolically speaking, a luxury. And yet, here's the beautiful part, it appears to be worth it. Because consciousness does something that no unconscious system has ever managed. It asks why. It doesn't just respond to stimuli. It wonders. It builds science and poetry and bad puns and YouTube videos. It stares at the night sky and feels small in a way that isn't panic, it's awe. It falls in love, not just because hormones say to, but because somewhere in that 100 trillion connection web, it constructs the concept of another person's inner life and decides that life matters. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio calls this the self comes to mind, the moment evolution stumbled onto a brain that could model not just the world, but itself in the world. And once you can model yourself, you can plan, you can imagine alternatives, you can cooperate with strangers. You can build civilizations, you can make speeches at events, for better or worse. Consciousness may be an accident of scale and complexity. It may be an emergent property, something that popped out of the system the way wetness pops out of H2O without being present in any single molecule. It may be a cosmic fluke, a glitch, the universe briefly, inexplicably, forgetting to be unconscious. But here we are, glitching together. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, really thinking, about your own existence, I want you to appreciate what's happening. 86 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections, 540 million years of evolution. The death of countless species, the rise and fall of continents, the migration of your ancestors across mountains and oceans and ice, all of it, every improbable step, just so that you could sit here tonight and wonder what you're doing with your life. And if that doesn't make you feel simultaneously special and absurd, I don't know what will. Because at the end of the day, consciousness is the universe looking at itself. You are 13.8 billion years of stellar evolution that has developed the ability to be embarrassed. And I think that's worth celebrating.